Good morning, and good evening to those in Asia who are listening to our Facebook Live. This is a new thing again for us. We are in-person meeting. All of us here that have attended are vaccinated, and so we all have a designated musician, a designated reader, and of course myself. Today, we also celebrate Mother's Day. And my sermon is, how do we love our mothers? One of the most beautiful poems many of us learned while in college was one written by Elizabeth Barrett Browning entitled, How Do I Love Thee? Right? How many of you have remembered those beautiful, and I'm sure many of us even have memorized. That's called Sonnet 43, and the title is How Do I Love Thee? It was, of course, written by Elizabeth for her husband, Robert Browning, who was also a poet. But today, on Mother's Day, I like to use at least the first line of that poem as a dedication to all the mothers who are here, all the mothers who are listening to us, and all our mothers who have gone before us. So with the apologies to Elizabeth Barrett Browning, I changed the word I to we. How do we love thee? So how do we love thee, our mothers? Let us count the ways. We love thee to the depths and breadth and height our souls can reach. When feeling out of sight for the ends of being an ideal grace. So why must we love our mothers with the depths and breadths and heights our souls can reach? I can think of 1,000 reasons, but today I'll share a few precious reasons why I love my mother, and hoping that you too can testify in some other time and ways the precious reasons why you must love your mothers. Of course, I love my mother because she gave birth to me, she cared for me, and she loved me to the end. But aside from these obvious reasons, I love my mom because she was my first teacher who taught me how to live, how to love, and how to share my life and my love to others. Her teaching in word and deed have become the foundation of my life, and I suppose to all of us today. The reasoning I do now and continue to do, which had formed my ideas and ideals, all have their roots upon mother. The first lesson I learned from my mom is the traditional respect for the elders. This is called in our Asian culture as filial piety. Mothers in the Philippines are called nanay. It's called nanay. And my mother, like most of Filipino mothers, taught the children the habit of calling not only herself, but every elderly woman as nanay, and every elderly man as tatay. And like Jesus calling everyone who do God's will as my father, my mother, my brother, my sister, my mom also taught us the filial respect should be given to everyone. Now, in the Bible, the 5th commandment says, honor thy mother and thy father. And mind you, it is the only commandment of the 10 commandments which has a corresponding promise. And what is the promise? Exodus chapter 20, verse 12 says, honor your father and your mother so that you may live long on the earth. So that is the only commandment with such a promise. longevity of life. I have always wondered why, with all her siblings, she has many brothers. She's the only daughter, but she has so many brothers. And she was the eldest. I was always wondered why, with all her siblings, my mother, who was the eldest, was also the one who lived the longest. She practically lived to bury and mourn the death of her younger brothers, like 7 of them. And why? Because of all the siblings, she was the one who always honored her mother and her father. I remember growing up that my mother was the one who really cared for my grandfather and my grandmother when they become very old themselves and even become blind because of old age. And it was not easy for a woman to take care of, the elderly, even as she took care of us, 6 children. But my mother persevered in taking care first of Grandpa, and when he died, Grandma, without neglecting us. So a word of advice, especially to the younger generations who are listening to me today, if you want to live long on the face of the earth, today, Mother's Day, honor your father and your mother, most especially your mother. The second thing I learned from my mother is survival. We were very poor, but we did not really go hungry. And it was because my father and my mother worked very hard, and they knew how to survive even in what is called parched lands. In our barrio, it's the village, during my childhood, there were only 5 wealthy families. They owned the land. The rest were very poor people. Philippines was what is called a semi-feudal society, and my barrio was an example of the agrarian system inherited from Spanish colonialism. The 5 families were the owners of the farmlands. The rest were tenants, farmers working the fields, fishermen, and simply poor people. In the what is called rice economy, there were only 2 seasons, the planting season and the harvesting season. And in between are called lean months. The lean months were when the rice supply ran out, and many families would face the prospect of hunger with no rice to cook. Now, rice is the staple food in the Philippines. What did we do to survive? First, to economize on rice, my mother would cook only half a portion of rice and combine it with cassava and corn and sweet potatoes. So in the kettle, there's only 1/2 rice, and half of them were chopped cassava, tapioca, sweet potato, and corn. The second, we walked miles to go to the town to line up for the government's emergency rice program. Now, people in the Philippines, in Asia, and Africa know about this. During famine days, the government would have what we call emergency program. And my mom and I would line up for these pantries to get food, to get rice. And so I know, as I was looking at the internet news about food pantries spontaneously rising up in many communities, and people lining up, even here in Queens, people lining up for free this and free that food, I know what it means. At one time, I almost got crushed in a riot when people rioted to obtain free rice. Third, we went into cassava business. At night, my mom would cook cassava cakes. Early at dawn, we would go to the fisherman's wharf and barter, not sell, but barter the cassava cake with fish. And then we would go up the mountain to barter the fish to the farmers with rice. So as a child, I think I was 7 or 8 years old, I would carry for my mom a large basket of cassava cakes to go to the beach, to the fisherman's wharf. And then after that, I would carry 2 pails of fish to the mountain. And then we will barter that with rice. So coming down from the mountain, going back to our barrio, I would carry a sack of rice. And that's, my friends, the reason why I did not grow tall. Anyway, so the third thing that I learned from my mom is the love of learning. Well, she herself did not finish grade school because of World War II. She had always inculcated in us the value of education. Now, education is the greatest equalizer in any society. And as a youth, leader in the Philippines, before I became a seminarian and priest, I always tell the Sunday school to value education. Filipino parents would go to length to send their children to school. For our family, that was very hard. We were 6 children. My father was a war veteran, but did not receive any pension from the government because after the Second World War, after MacArthur, landed and liberated the Philippines, there was another war, the Korean War. And my father was to be sent to Korea to participate in another war. But my mom prevailed for him not to leave. So he was kind of declared AWOL, absence without leave, and so he was penalized by not having a pension. So my father worked as a tailor, but his income was not enough to send us to school. So when I reached high school, I learned that they could not even afford to send us to high school. So I learned from my stories to some of you, I stowed away in a ship to Manila, ventured there and became a street kid, and finally became a janitor and exchanged for school. And what motivated me to risk leaving my barrio, struggle against all odds to obtain education? Now, this is the story. At age 7, my mother enrolled me to grade 1 at the Barrio Elementary School. At that time, in 1957, there was a feeding program for the children of indigent families, and I was one of those who belonged to the category. So at lunchtime, the poor kids would be lining up with their glass bowls to receive corn pudding, courtesy of what is called CARE program, introduced by the Peace Corps volunteers in the Philippines. Those Peace Corps volunteers during the time of Kennedy came from the United States. They went to Asia and Africa and helped the people. Now, in one of those free lunches, I was given a pudding in my glass bowl, but the bowl was so hot that I dropped the bowl, and the bowl fell down onto the cement floor and broke into pieces. So I went home crying because that was the only glass bowl we have in our house. So my mother, got mad, but she made me a bowl made of coconut shell, And so I went back to school, and my classmates made fun of me because of this coconut shell. Now, in our school, in our barrio school, a glass of ceramic bowl or a glass bowl is some kind of a status symbol. A coconut shell is to become a poorest of the poor. So I was ridiculed by the bullies in the school because of my coconut bowl. So I hated school, and I would not go to school anymore. But my mom would patiently talk me to it. And when I became very stubborn, she would spank me with a broom made of coconut, stalks. Something like this. I brought this one. I have this one to remind me of my mom. This is the one that she would spank me with. When I don't go to school, she would spank me, and sometimes she would even stay in school to make sure that I do not run away. So, but anyway, she gave me an advice and said, "My son, you can be more than we are if you study hard and get education. Do not be ashamed of your coconut bowl, most important is that you are good in class. But if you do not go to school, my broom will haunt you forever. So I was afraid of this broom in my life, but it taught me education. Today, not to brag, but I finished grade school, I finished high school, I went to college, got two bachelor's degrees, obtained 2 master's degrees, and of course 2 doctorate degrees. And I've been to some universities in the US and in England because of my mother's broom. So that's the third thing that I learned from my mom, education. Those of you who are listening to me, young people, remember education. Get education as much as you can. We have here our junior warden Roy, whose daughter is a scholar at Oxford University. The fourth thing that I learned from my mother is believe in God and believe in yourself. There are many things that I learned from my mom, but it appears that I'm boasting. But the fourth and final thing that I want to share with you is faith in God and faith in yourself. To believe in God is all right, but to believe in yourself is a big thing for us. Many Filipinos grew up believing in God, but not believing in themselves. In history, we were a colonized people. For 300 years, we were dominated by the Spaniards, by Spain, who considered Filipinos as inferior. For over 50 years, we were dominated or colonized by the Americans, who considered Filipinos backward. So even when we became free, independent, and sovereign, we still carried with us the baggage of colonization. What our African Americans would say, internalized oppression. We became consciously or unconsciously, experts of self-deprecation, to lower yourself. Compliment a Filipino, and he or she will not thank you, but instead will even humble herself or himself so much. So when you say to a Filipino, say, "Oh, you're beautiful," she will say, "No, I'm ugly." Or when you say, "Wow, you have a beautiful dress," the Filipino will say, "Well, this is a bargain sale from Walmart." They do not say thank you for the compliment, because we were taught to lower ourselves. So the point here is that my mom taught us to believe in ourselves. One time, as a child, I remember my mom registering my sister to a beauty contest. And beauty contests in Philippines are money contests, actually. So you have to, sell your votes. You sell people, and then, you may not be beautiful, but if you have many supporters, then you become a Miss Barrio or Miss somebody. But of course, my sister ran away and did not want to participate in the beauty contest. And she enrolled me to a singing contest. And of course, I could not sing as far as I'm concerned, so I hid behind a coconut tree. The MC was calling me, "Winifredo, the next singer is Winifredo." And they couldn't find me. And she enrolled me again to a declamation contest. And this time I did with all, she told me that when you are nervous speaking in public, all you have to do is to squeeze your ear and you will have the courage to speak. So I was squeezing my ear waiting for my time to declaim, and it's all red, but I spoke up and I won third because there were only 3 contestants. Reflecting upon it, with all the humor that is, reflecting upon it, the love that my mother showed to her children is that she believed in us, even though we do not believe in ourselves. And she taught us to believe, of course, in ourselves. Today we are much better than what we were before. This belief in God and belief in yourself is consistent with the teaching of Christ. We are all children of God, and we have the right to be here, to enjoy the bounties of the earth, and to be free to be and to do what we can and what we can be. So there is no reason for us to fear the future, for what God can do to a nobody. The writer Marianne Williamson said and wrote, remember Marianne Williamson? She is the one who ran for President of the United States, nominated, but she did not win. And she said this: our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There is nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. For we are all meant to shine as children do. We were born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. It is not just in some of us. It is in all of us. We are all God's children, no less than the stars in the sky. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. And as we are liberated from our own fears, our presence liberates others. Jesus said to his disciples, I do not call you servants any longer, because the servant does not know what the master is doing. But I have called you friends, because I have made known to you everything that I have learned from my Father. You did not choose me, but I chose you, and appointed you to go and bear fruit, the fruit that will last, so that the Father will give you everything you ask him in my name. The fruit that Jesus is talking about is love, which is the fruit of the Spirit. But there is no other human on earth whom God has revealed his perfect love, the fruit of the Spirit, than for the mothers. All are mothers. Mothers love their children as no other human being can. For mother's love is God's love. Now let me conclude this sharing that my mom did not leave us with worldly inheritance. She and my father brought us from their poverty. But she left us with a legacy of values which cannot be measured in dollars or pesos. She taught us to believe in God and believe in ourselves. Maybe that is the reason why the three of us surviving brothers, her children, are living today, are all ministers of the gospel. Pipito, my elder brother, is a lay minister of Jehovah's Witnesses, by the way. Alberto, my younger brother, is a priest of the Philippine Independent Church. He's also a government leader. And my elder brother is also a businessman and a Jehovah's Witness. And I am an Episcopalian priest. So when we gather together, all the surviving brothers, we have a wonderful discussions about God. But our unifying issue is the love of mother. My friends, today is Mother's Day, and I encourage you to honor your mothers in your heart. Amen.